All right, let's move on now to exhibit number 6 regarding the blood alcohol content of the victims.
Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims. That's false. You knew that was false. For anybody who had never heard that before, that question is now planted into them, unqualified representation that Mr. Kohberger stalked one of the witnesses, and that's false. We do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122. But we can put his phone in that area. There are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants.
Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Hey guys, this is Jules with True Crime Reactions. As you guys should know by now, we have received finally an unsealed document, and we have been going through the exhibits in them in order and separately in order to understand exactly what each one is trying to tell us. We've gone through the one for the timing advance records regarding Cyray's information and the FBI's refusal to actually turn over information that they claim to have used to say that Bryan Kohberger was guilty. We've also gone through the testimony for the expert disclosure rebuttal for his devices, Kohberger's phone, his laptop, his computer, also for some of the victims' devices, including and very specifically Bethany Funk's social media and activity on her iPad. Granted, we haven't seen anything regarding Bethany's data and activity the way that we have for Dylan's, but maybe this is a clue that more information could be coming soon. Now, this one is going to be very short because the majority of this exhibit for Gary Dawson is mostly his resume, his experience, the reason why he's able to come in and be an expert when it comes to alcohol content and how it affects the body. Now, we are about to jump into this chart here and do some comparisons to the measurements that we got from the blood spatter experts report, but we will be going back up into some of the conclusions and the paragraphs that are written up here in the summary, because there is some very specific information regarding Maddie, and it does mention the other victims' names with a couple more details. So let's go over the chart first, and then I'll go over this. Now, we're going to take this chart at the very bottom of this attachment, and we're going to compare it to the percentages and the measurements for each victim's BAC that was given to us in the blood spatter experts breakdown of the autopsy information that they themselves have seen. Because again, I will repeat, we have not seen any official autopsy documentation. Now, if you look at this chart, it looks like it's a bit wonky. Like it doesn't actually add up, but I guess because it's a range, it could have a little bit of leeway on each end. So let's just go ahead and go to the very specific numbers. For Kaylee, it says that her BAC was 0.107. That seems to be right here on level 2 between 0.03 and 0.1. 2, showing euphoria, mild euphoria, social ability, talkativeness, increased self-confidence, decreased inhibitions, diminution of attention, judgment and control, loss of efficiency in finer modal control and performance, increasing time to perception and latent response time, especially in divided attention situations, reduction of glare resistance and recovery, and lateral gaze nystagmus. Now we go to Maddie's, and hers was much, much higher at 0.282. And if you look where we have the 0.18-0.30, it seems like this one for confusion and the 0.27-0.40 for stupor would be together in this in way of disorientation, mental confusion, dizziness, exaggerated emotional state, disturbances of sensation and perception of color, form, motion, dimensions, decreased sense of pain, impaired balance, muscular incoordination, staggering gait, slurred speech, apathy, general inertia approaching paralysis, marked decreased response to stimuli, marked incoordination, difficulty standing or walking, vomiting, incontinence, impaired consciousness, or stupor. Now, we know that we've been told that it was not Maddie and Kaylee that took Murphy out that night, that it was actually Bethany and Maddie. Maddie ended up losing Murphy, or he just didn't come back. Remember, there's been reports of Murphy not coming back when he's being called for a very short period of time before the crimes took place. And it's really just made me wonder if someone was trying to warm Murphy up to them in order to get him not to react if they were in the house. It's a very big possibility. And we know that Kaylee has instances of there being someone watching her. She did tell some friends of hers back in September of 2022 about a stalkerish type situation. And it wasn't just one friend. There is collectively 4 to 5 that remember having this conversation with her in September. We also need to keep in mind that Bryan Kohberger and the stalking insinuations and allegations are completely false, according to the prosecution themselves.
Kohberger allegedly stalked one of the victims. That's false. You knew that was false. For anybody who had never heard that before, that question is now planted into them, unqualified representation that Mr. Kohberger stalked one of the witnesses, and that's false. We do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122. But we can put his phone in that area. There are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants.
Now we can jump to Xana's, which was 0.229, but we also have to remember that she also had an amphetamine level of 12 nanograms per milliliter. We went over all of this information in a little bit more depth when it comes to the amphetamine levels in this video here. And of course, we also did an in-depth one for Kaylee and Maddie as well. Now, again, Xana's was 0.229, which would fall again in the confusion state, but also the excitement state. For excitement, it says emotional instability, decreased inhibition, loss of critical judgment, impairment of short-term memory and comprehension, decreased sensory response, increased reaction time, muscular coordination begins, slurred speech, gait, balance, impairment of binocular coordination, impairment of depth perception. Now we can jump down to Ethan's, which again also includes amphetamine levels of 260 nanograms per milliliter. His BAC was 0.122, so significantly lower, much closer to Kaylee's. So you would put his pretty much right here at euphoria along with excitement. Now, we also know from context clues about how Ethan and Xana were found that he was basically naked, minus socks. He had a blanket over him. Xana was no longer in a complete outfit or the outfit that we saw her in the infamous photo. She was found in just her underwear and a gray sweatshirt. We also know, according to other context clues and other information from this case, that there's supposedly a DoorDash order and food that was being eaten. And she also put up one hell of a fight. It is written all in the blood on the floor. Now I'm going to jump through some of these paragraphs, and again in the description box will be a link to a Google Share folder where all of these have been printed out separately so that you can read the rest of this stuff yourself. I want to just start right here and talk about the specific information about the victims. It says, in this case, there is a limited information available to me about the extent of the alcohol consumption by Maddie Mogen on the night of 11/12 to 11/13/22, other than she appeared intoxicated upon returning home. Well, that's interesting considering, again, we have the blood spatter expert giving us the measurements that are apparently in the autopsy reports that they have seen, but we, the public, have not. So one would assume that this person received the exact same information. The information suggests that the interval from the time of last alcohol consumption by Mogen and the time of the attack was about 3 hours. This interval should allow for complete absorption of alcohol, i.e., the post-absorptive stage, from the stomach and minimizing the confounding of postpartum redistribution from stomach contents. When alcohol is absorbed into the blood, it distributes to total body water, not to any particular tissue or organ. The source of the blood toxicology sample from Mogen was noted to be cavity blood or extravascular blood and was reported as 0.282, which is exactly what it says in the other report. While cavity blood is the least preferred source for drug analysis, it can still be instructive under certain circumstances, particularly with alcohol, as alcohol distributes throughout the body waters. I wanted to get an exact answer for this, so I asked, where is cavity blood taken from? And it says the antecubital fossa, which is the inner crease of the elbow, pretty much where your IV goes or where your blood is usually drawn when you go to like the hospital or to do lab work. I have had it done at the top of my hand and maybe like one other place prior, but they do always try to go to the veins in the inner crease of the elbow, as far as my experience has always been. So it's interesting that this one that is so common is the one that's least preferred for this kind of testing. Given the known pharmacokinetics of alcohol, the likely 3-hour interval between last consumption and Mogen's death, and the absence of disruption of the intestinal tract, according to Dr. Singh's personal communications, meaning conversations this person had with the medical examiner personally, the measured alcohol concentration would be indicative of gross intoxication. Some minor change in alcohol concentration post-mortem cannot be ruled out, and a cautious interpretation would be appropriate. Summary conclusion. It is my opinion that Maddie Mogen would have been markedly intoxicated from the effects of alcohol around the time of her death. She would not have the ability to mount a meaningful response to a sudden threat to her person. And then it says to see table 1, which is what we just went over. I have limited my review of that to Maddie Mogen. However, the same general principles would apply to Kaylee, cavity blood, Xana Kernodle, peripheral blood, and Ethan Chapin, cardiac blood. So nothing is being actually used as a constant here. So let's check the peripheral blood. This says it comes from almost the same area. Peripheral blood is typically drawn from peripheral veins, most commonly from the antecubital veins, which is the inner elbow, or dorsal hand veins, which is the veins on the back of the hand. That's the other place I've also had it done before as well. So if it's the same area, then I don't know why he would be putting it the way that he's putting it. So I'm going to assume that since he's using a different verbiage, that maybe this means it's coming from the dorsal hand area. That's also mentioned in this definition of this kind of vein. But again, this guy is also admitting that Maddie stuff is the only stuff he's actually seen, and even that was very limited. So given what we've already seen in this case, let's also take these expert disclosures with a big grain of salt as well. Now, cardiac blood literally needs no further explanation, but it does say that when blood is taken this way with this label, that it specifically will come from the right atrium, which receives the deoxygenated blood from the body via the superior and inferior vena cava. This blood then flows through the right ventricle into the lungs for oxygenation before returning to the left atrium. So they take the blood while it is still blue, basically, before it's been oxygenated, because we know that once oxygen hits your blood, that's when it becomes red.
The heart consists of 4 chambers called the right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium, and left ventricle. Deoxygenated blood from the body enters the right atrium from the inferior and superior vena cava. It then passes into the right ventricle. When the heart contracts, it pumps deoxygenated blood from the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. It is here that oxygen passes into the blood and carbon dioxide diffuses out. The oxygenated blood then enters the left atrium, passes into the left ventricle, from where it is pumped out of the aorta to the body again.
So I don't know if there's a scientific reason why it's done with the deoxygenated blood and not the freshly oxygenated blood, but I'll probably look further into that because now I'm curious. Well, that's it for this expert disclosure. But if you've been here for a while, as we've been going through these documents from the police, all the departments, including all of the different court systems that are involved in this is not new information to you in way of levels and how everything was being described. Now, we also again have this footage, the footage of Jack Showalter and Maddie Mogen and Kaylee Goncalves walking from the corner club towards John's Alley and then diverting to the grub truck. And we can see how they're walking. We also see in the grub truck video how very unsturdy both of the girls were. And we also know that the rest of everyone was drinking too, for the most part. The differences here is who was cognitive in order to call 911 and who wasn't. See, when it comes to Dylan's story, they wanted us to believe for a really long time that she was super intoxicated and just in and out of sleep and into deep sleeps. And that's why the delay in 911 and all the things. But none of that was true. She actually didn't drink an entire Borg by herself. She took sips of one throughout the night. She drank some really light mimosas during the day, White Claws, which are also very low in alcohol content. And one thing that some people seem to forget here is that these were not people that were just like weekend drinkers or drank for just special occasions to where there would be large gaps of time where their body could sort of rest in between drinking and having alcohol coming back into it again. These were people in this time of their life that were partying daily. So their tolerances were a lot higher than most people's are when you really think about everything. And that doesn't take away the fact that there was intoxication. There was definitely not a sober person in that house as far as I'm concerned, but levels, they do matter. Were they going to be enough for this to have maybe not happened? I don't know. I know that if anyone was asleep, it was Maddie. The whole thing with Kaylee and Xana and Murphy and who was where and what happened first. There's a lot of questions in that because we have a story from Dylan that has changed over time. We also have a story from the police department, but then also no working narrative when it comes to the prosecution. So when it comes to going back into all of these things that were going to be submitted before we had this completely to the left plea situation happen, it's really hard to see exactly what they were going to do because we already know the end results and we already know what they've told us. No connection. They can't actually put him there. Nothing else has come of anything in this investigation except for that damn DNA. The DNA that was on a resubmitted swab that was apparently from a snap, but then none of the forensic documents actually state that. It all came from a strap. They're not giving us paper trails for the resubmission. They're not telling us what happened. We also have the sample being magnified several times using different techniques before it was sent off to be tested by Othram. Then we really just don't know for sure exactly what was sent over to the FBI. Was it something that was created from the original SNP? Was it stuff that was done with Othram's information? Was it a big packet of everything? What exactly happened with all of these transfers? Because the sample information that was sent to the feds suddenly was even more magnified than even some of the most renowned people in the genealogy scene at the time have ever seen, and can't explain how it went from this tiny profile to this ginormous deleted profile now that the FBI has never shown literally to anyone, and the state themselves have never seen any of the work that the FBI did. All of the ridiculousness with the DNA, again, the only thing that they have in this case actually ended up causing the judge to tell both the prosecution and the defense to figure out the narrative that they wanted to tell when it came to how the DNA match came about, and then to pick their puppet. And that's where Brett Payne came not into play, but back into play. So while yes, all of this is old information, these are filings from back in the very beginning of 2025, before any of the interviews and the police reports and the crime scene photos and all these things actually came out after the plea. And we still see them grasping at straws. They were doing nothing but grasping at straws. They weren't even allowing this one person to look at everyone's information collectively. This expert only looked at Maddie's information. Why? That's weird. That's weird in my opinion. Why wouldn't you have someone look at everything? Maybe they had an expert for each person. Maybe only one person got to see everyone's information collectively. I don't know how they delegate things. I know it's probably a lot more complicated than most of us think. And I might be overdoing it, but who really knows what goes on? Because there's so much secrecy in all of these cases. We're going through these one a day, so make sure that you have your notification bell set to all. But again, that is it. Let me know what you guys are thinking about all of this information that we've been going over down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.